versed in Vulcan Kukulsheim, der Ideen, Prince in the Cloud Cuckoo Land, the idea. So I want to make this little presentation on the religious freedoms document. It's like 250 pages or something like that. I just sort of glanced at what Grok pointed out to me. I haven't really looked at it this closely, but the case I want to make just from that preliminary um, look is to say that what we're dealing with in terms of psychic agency behind it is really is really a dialectical motion. So the tracks that were put down by woke, this notion of safe space and the notion of certain intellectual histories to back up the LGBTQ notions, are now being used to back up this. I never saw that Handmaiden's Tale, but it gives one the sort of superficial impression of a bit of a Handmaiden's Tale ideology. I mean, of course, that's slander on the idea by the left. It's the person that made it was attempting to show some kind of miserable situation. So I think, again, this is a kind of project which it then becomes kind of funny, what does it mean that we give? So I think, for instance, if you look at the OED, you get sort of the most perfect form of, so far as you want sort of free data on the intellectual development of the West, on sort of the history of ideas. The Oxford English Dictionary is probably our best sort of quasi-neutral document. We have also Catholic sources would otherwise be the best, but of course they have a dog in the race. And so this document I'm seeing is it's talking about Foucault, Heidegger, John Dewey, and it's talking about Max Weber, and so it gets a lot of things sort of in the right direction in a vague way. And so when I say in the right direction, I mean based on taking Leo Strauss and his account as canonical, which I do really pretty much. It's sort of they get a lot of things sort of in the right direction. They don't have any details or anything, but they're still sort of in the right direction. I would say it would be more realistic if they would start with they should start with the following: 1848. 1848 in Prussia is the moment when there was a distinction made whereby for the university, it was no longer taken for granted that one could say something one could say these things one says in the household prior to any classroom education, where you could say this is a good chair, it's good that there's furniture in the house, and you would use terms of evaluation of the good, the true, and the Kalon, or the noble. We have the phrase noble. We don't have the proper understanding of what noble meant. Noble is used in the German context in the Edel gas, or the ideal gases, in the sense of chemistry, because helium and some other rarefied gases are noble in the sense that they avoid a lot of interactions and they sort of stay aloof or something. It's called noble gases, and they're very rare and so on. Kalon, it's this word is used already by Sappho, where it's just saying, like, is it more Calon to see the sight of an army of drones? Taken as somebody who thinks army of drones is kind of cool, because it's like this look at the power we're wielding on the battlefield, or a fleet. That's a better aircraft carrier, or is it the face of the person that you love? Which one is more Calon? So this question was already asked in deep antiquity, so that therefore just taken this way, that the good, the true, and the beautiful have sort of a meaning that we could still understand. But it was since 1848 it was taken that no longer can we, as scientists, regard these so-called transcendentals as part of the facticity, and speaking in a sort of backwards way, as Heidegger calls it, the facticity of things. Facticity is kind of now a confused term in the wake of this division. So it's like it used to be people were kind of had a pet idea, they were sure it was right, and then it got smashed that because Descartes came in, and then we could see the data for that in the Oxford English Dictionary, because it says, basically what Descartes did is sort of created this matrix view where it's as though we were actually inside knowledge, and then epistemology becomes a thing sometime after Kant. But already in Descartes' time, Descartes died in 1650, and the first big document of his the power that that came to sway over all of Christendom at the time, and then Spinoza came directly afterward, and then the so-called Enlightenment started to crop up everywhere. In the OED it says the meanings of subject and object almost reversed in meaning, and so it's like the way I interpret this is to say this is the freest way you can present the situation where the word totally changed in meaning. So it's like it didn't become opposite, because if it became opposite, it would be as though there was a question, you answered it one way and then you answered it the other way. It just like totally radically changed. So it's like almost opposite, but it's like even worse. That's the way that seems to be and in fact that's like the most objective way you can say it. How else are the people that made the OED supposed to state this matter? That's how they state it. And in other words, I'm following them and taking that to be the most accurate way to state it. And it also, when I think it over, it seems like that's right. I don't see any better way to state the matter. But so there you have a document of the moment when the matrix view of reality came in, and it coincides with the dawning of then. Did I mention this, that the Port Royal logic is sort of the first document of that era, and shows you like what Descartes did to Aristotle, sort of. But in any case, so like we get after it ripens for a while, for a couple hundred years, we get 1848, and there's finally it just becomes the division between the so-called humanities and the science and the physical sciences. So I think 1848 would be the clear moment for the people in this document to state as the beginning. Otherwise, they're kind of, even though a lot of their history is correct, because it's showing sort of the continued development of this Cartesian power. The way Strauss stated it is, it's like you get on a fast-moving train, and you can't pull the brakes because you would just be killed immediately. It's like, it's not something where there's so much swimming through all our thinkings and doings that you can't just suddenly say, oh, I'm not a Cartesian. I've got a conviction I'm not a Cartesian, because everyone around you is still like infected with it. But even if you change them, you would still be, you wouldn't notice all the points where it's coming in, because it's actually at the level of the word subjective. It's at the level of the word objective. You wouldn't even know how to fix the problem. Even if you told yourself you didn't believe in it, you wouldn't know what to replace it with. And there'd be no way to leap back into the old before it became a problem. Because now there's epistemology, and now knowledge has become identical with the world, as it never had before. And this is everything you've got since you were a child has been full of the spirit of this, because it's all about the hard sciences and the division between the hard sciences and the subjective, or the emotions, or so for instance, the notion that the facts are different than emotions in this Ben Shapiro, he gets a lot of mileage out of this stupid slogan, because people don't know quite what to do with it and sort of thing. It's false, obviously, because if somebody does something evil, we actually should be emotional about it, because we should actually be passionately angry about it, and actually we should hate that at least. So there's an argument whether we should hate the act or hate the person is difficult. Sometimes it seems like there would be no way to put a stop to the act, fact, or actuality of the thing. Like the juries are supposed to determine what the act is or the fact is, and people used to talk about a noble act. The language has changed according to this shift, where now fact is supposed to mean something apart from. I describe it sort of something evil, right? I describe something evil, and then you're supposed to be, if you're scientific, you're supposed to be able to discriminate and say this is the neutral occurrence, like somebody's cut off somebody's head or something, let's say. You're supposed to be able to somehow discriminate between saying this is a hateful act, this thing should be, when you hate something, let's take it this way, it means you want it to be extinguished internally. So if you see there's somebody cutting off heads, then to hate that practice means to want it to be stopped for permanently. This basic field, which is obviously unclear and swimming, and one can't really come to easy conclusions about it, is all at stake in this 1848 attempt to cleanse things out and to make the sciences perfect. So, but then we do see, it's interesting, this mention of. So I my understanding now is, again, it's I think what they're doing is woke part 2, except now it's school children and their parents, or people in workplaces or whatever, who need a safe space against the liberal professors and against Heidegger or whatever. Let's go through those for just 1 second. So Weber is probably, in my opinion, de facto the most powerful, and so they're accurate in pointing to him. And Weber was an early adopter of Nietzsche, so that's accurate, along with Simmel. Simmel is, in Strauss's terms, he has more cognitive dignity. Strauss doesn't actually say that, but I'm just using his terms because I think Simmel has more cognitive dignity, especially because his logic is more sort of unparalleled in its acuteness and the way it lays things out, in his enlightened Leitung to the moral Wissenschaft, especially, which is the most powerful text on this subject to Kerr, I would say. But so yeah, they're correct actually that this is in a broad way. Again, they don't really give any details that are of any interest, but in a broad way, they're throwing things down that are accurate. If we want to see the most powerful observers of this movement, of this happening, of this dawning nihilism, and that's a question. So that's one way to address the problem from the point of view of, is this something happening that Nietzsche observes? The event, the Ereignus of nihilism, which corresponds to the Ereignus of the matrix view of reality. Knowledge is event in the human being. Knowledge is the word of the matrix. It's like, a question is like, did this man Friedrich Nietzsche just like invent this subjectively ex nihilo, or is it just like a fiction of his that a lot of people are just like transfixed by or something, or is it that he's describing something that's actually happening, an actual process that's he's just has a keener vision, and his revelation of it is better, and his art of presentation of it is better because he's more literate than most, and people like to read him. But there's nothing wrong with writing in a way that people like to read you, per se. That's just a way to get people to take the medicine. I mean, it doesn't discredit Nietzsche that he's a good writer, okay? Kant was a bad writer in a certain way that makes him seem more like a heavy Teutonic and serious guy somehow. And also ditto with Hegel, right? So, I mean, people will argue with that about Hegel because there's some beautiful phrases like, this man had the emotions of a blind man who would suddenly come into possession of sight, and how the sun is rising, and right, his description of the dawn of the Greeks, of the first Greeks who laid the presuppositions for all of this. So like notice one of the points. It's like this edifice of our Western thinking is not like it's lived in human beings who thought that way, and it came from sources like Anaximander and Heraclitus and Parmenides, and those what they saw. So like, again, if like, is Nietzsche actually seeing something, this nihilism unfolding, or is he just inventing it? So it's like what they were witness to, or whatever it is. Maybe we can't, with the first thinkers yet, make a distinction between whether this question of whether they invented it themselves, or whether they observed it and were just captivated by it and reported on it. Maybe this distinction doesn't, it can't properly be applied to the first thinkers and their rightness. Yeah, so then they mentioned Weber properly, I think. And because Weber is the biggest, so for instance, it's clear that Weber got rid of the Platonic ideas and brought in his so-called ideal types. Weber was the big behind Frank Knight and all the most powerful teachers of economics in America. It's part and parcel of this hyper-rationalized marginalist school, which like sort of makes sense to nobody, but isn't totally in power. You get this weak pushback from Cass Sunstein and Daniel Kahneman and so on, but it's like, it was a way, like, people already knew it was wrong for 50 years before they came out with this, and nobody really cares. It's like, maybe that's not how economics really functions anyway. It's almost like when you hear Paul Krugman talk on his podcast, you're kind of like, this is a very meek individual. Like, it's like, he's intellectually very honest. He's sort of like presents himself sort of as genteel. Like, it's like, oh, I'm a professor. But also has sort of like, I don't know, not a man who is pulling the strings in any way, in the sense of a gray eminence or something. It's just like an academic, sort of, like, except that he's like a little more honest than most academics. And his honesty consisted of sort of like, oh, here's my views of what we should do based on these false teachings, like based on the only teachings I know as a trained economist. So we have aside from Weber, who's like sort of all powerful in the American universities, and they're correct. Um, yeah, Weber propounding a special version of the Wertfrei Wissenschaft also, but Simmel being the one who really developed Wertfrei Wissenschaft, I think, more clearly. Um, and this document is then talking about Foucault and Heidegger and Dewey. So it's like in what Strauss says is like Dewey was more like Aristotle in that he had a positive claim that this was the truth. The guy John Dewey in writing this teaching, and this teaching is the truth. And it's sort of like if a judge were to sentence somebody to death, the judge can't say, well, yeah, there's other interpretations. The judge has to say, I think this is true, that this man deserves to be put to death. Likewise, Dewey is saying this is the true teaching. It's still according to the Agathon, it's still according to the old tradition, but it's different in that it's mainly focused on sort of going from impulses to habits with a sort of supervision from intelligence. That's like his main system. So it's like focuses on experimentalism in a way that, of course, like Aristotle wouldn't, because Aristotle mainly focuses on the most sort of making tweaks on top of customary sense or common sense. Like customary sense thinks water boils at within a certain little range. I mean, and there's a whole thing on this with Hosek Chang that I don't want to go into it. But like the simple tweak that you have to make is then you find out there's altitude and air pressure play a role, and then you have to say, okay, water doesn't just simply boil as common sense or customary sense would think at this temperature, rather there's other factors. This type of tweak sort of characterizes the way Aristotle operates in a sort of empirical way. He thinks, yeah, the common sense or customary sense can be improved upon in some cases, but basically we can stick with it. Whereas Dewey is like, we have to constantly make experiments, but maybe eventually we'll come to the truth. Whereas then Foucault and Heidegger, like the American History Association, like Trump and, so it's like Trump and, who's that guy? Dr. Phil. In the discussion of Trump and Dr. Phil, they mentioned presentism, and they're talking about whether the standard of the times have to go. Like if you have a Barrows Hall, like we had this building called the Social Sciences Building, but it used to be called Barrows Hall, and that's because Barrows was put down as like being a racist. And so then presentism, according to the Dr. Phil and Trump interview, means that we have to judge according to the times. That morality changes according to the times, in other words. So like this view corresponds to the level of derangement Heidegger recognizes as a serious power in the world. And so like as proved by the Dr. Phil Trump interview, like they really seriously think there's a standard of the time, and there's been some error made by changing names because there was a standard of the time and that guy was sort of in keeping with it, and so on. Heidegger doesn't. This is also called like historical consciousness, and like this is the third level of history according to Hegel. First, there's people that actually lived in the thing and knew what it was about. Then there's academics that write about the people who lived in it based on reports. Then there's the philosophers who talk about everything that can be talked about on the subject of historiology, they call it. Who else do we have here? So, like, yeah, we have this difference between Dewey, who still tries to give an old type of account about truth, and then these accounts that are like confused at a more basic level. But notice it's not like just to say they're against some form of Christianity is insufficient. Because why? Because if the arguments that they make are cogent, so like if it's cogent that we can give an example and say this is a really strong factor in human life that people like Trump and Dr. Phil are arguing about the historical consciousness on the basis of the philosophy of presentism, which stems from Hegel, um, then isn't that a serious thing that we have to pay attention to? And then isn't it then something that we can't just dispense by pretending we could just become Christians and ignore the problem of historical consciousness? We actually can't ignore the problem of historical consciousness that easily. That doesn't mean we have to choose to sort of affirm it. So like Heidegger doesn't affirm it, but he admits that it's a power on the earth. And then Foucault is just sort of a bastardized student of Heidegger, who sort of Lucifer or something in a certain way, because it's like he fell from heaven to heaven. If Heidegger is the heavens, then the flower of heaven, once ours, now lost, becomes this sort of extreme, this sort of use of Heidegger to like you one sees in the debate with Chomsky, to say we don't know what justice is, but we're totally in this problem of the radical Aragness and everything. Like, we don't know. Whereas Chomsky, who I think was kind of mentally ill guy, but nonetheless, he still had the old sort of naive type of ideas, just like, yeah, actually we know what's good and bad. It's obvious, and it's obvious that the right wing is evil. It's obvious that George Bush is evil. It's obvious that Alex Jones is evil, and we know the difference between good and bad. And I'm the one here to give manifest expression to that. And Foucault is just like, he's too suspicious. Something's wrong with him. So I think that comes out clearly. Once you see, if anyone who would admit that Noam Chomsky is, however brilliant he is in many ways, is mentally ill on a certain political interpretations, because he just sort of like reads in this total presumptory notion that he knows right and wrong, and it's easy to do, right? But it's like when you then exercise your cognitive powers in a way where you stand back a little bit, sometimes you see what seemed to you to be right might not be right. Like, it might be, like, there's a question right now, like, for instance, is it right for people who don't like Vance and don't like the Republicans to nonetheless back Vance, because it would simply be better to, if you have a lot of derangement, a lot of murder going on, maybe it would be better to, even if you don't really like Vance, maybe it would actually be better to encourage Vance to the civil courage of invoking the 25th Amendment, right? There's some things they might seem like totally bad, except you then kind of see them in a different angle, and you're like, maybe Vance is actually not that bad. And also, in addition, Vance was against the war. And you might, I'll give you a larger example, which again will probably fail with a lot of people, but nonetheless, I think it's true. Heidegger. So it's like, people like to say Heidegger's a Nazi, but Heidegger did an imitatio Platon. He imitated Plato's journey to Syracuse, or 3 journeys to Syracuse, by joining the Nazi Party. He made an attempt to play a part in active life. He made an attempt to not to build things in speech and the shadows of the houses, but rather to play an active role in the political life of the Greeks. And likewise, Heidegger, he made an attempt to play an active role in a positive way with the tyrant. And actually, this is what Kant says to do, but I don't think Heidegger did it for that reason. But I would just say, Kant says it's better to have a tyrant than to have a complete government breakdown, as Obama caused in Syria. I'm being sort of stupidly polemical with that, but it's like, it did seem like a good example. To me, it's obvious. Like, it's you have like there was some stupid movie with Josh Rogan infiltrating a neo-Nazi group or something like that. It's like um, the identification with Heidegger and like people that wanted death camps is ludicrous. Um, Heidegger was a very good man, and I think this is also Leo Strauss says the same thing because Leo Strauss says if you want to know why Heidegger joined the Nazis early on, read the dedication to Paul Nator at the beginning of the Sophist book, and likewise Hannah Arendt maintains a relationship with Heidegger. So that's like it's absurd the way that one can see people in a false light if and well, forget about like that as it just take that as an abstract example. Like somebody could think they know obviously what was good, but then you have some kind of El Qadir, or the green one, experience. Like El Qadir leads Moses around. He said, Moses, you're going to think that I'm bad and you're not going to understand what I'm doing and you're going to won't suffer me. And then there's like a couple things happen, and then then Moses was like, why are you doing this? You're evil. And then he found out more details. He found out it's good. So it's like the mere adducing of this claim that we know good from evil, it's not good enough. It's not good enough, because then you end up with, I mean, I wouldn't trust Hegseth any more than I would trust Chomsky on that. There's a lot of insane people. There's a lot of deranged people that claim, that have a sense that think they know that there's truly a good and bad. So I don't see the problem with Foucault admitting that he kind of doesn't know. He kind of doesn't know. He's like, I don't really know what's just. I might be operating under the, the forces of my upbringing. I might be operating under more cosmic forces. Like, what kind of being am I? Where am I? Not just where am I in the state of evolution, but in some other sense. Who knows? But the Cartesian question kind of pushes us into that space where we find it more natural to ask that type of question. Just as we ask the question whether our eyes are the natural type of eyes, or whether spider's eyes or some other kind of eyes are equally valid. I don't see the problem with asking the questions Foucault asks. They just have to be asked in a responsible way. So what else is there here that they're talking about? Foucault, Heidegger. Okay, that's sort of about it. But I think, to me, the most interesting thing here is the dialectic between all the sort of paths that have been laid out by Woke, and now using sort of those same tracks to kind of like mainline just in a different direction. I don't think so. Like, I just want to add this one remark. I don't think one can just like say, oh, okay, so they're just copying Woke, therefore it's invalid, therefore it's not serious. I mean, it's just this, in a way, this is just a form in which they're ushering in those energies and those missions that they have set for themselves. And we're seeing it outplay. We're seeing it begin to play out in that kind of in that form, where it's harnessing certain paths that have already been prepared by the woke left.